In the stillness of these July days, something in you has already started to shift, and you can feel it before you can explain it. The title is not just a warning about dates on a calendar. It is a call to notice how your spirit reacts when time starts to feel heavier than usual. You have not been imagining the pressure, the delay, or the strange inward alertness that seems to wake up when everything outside still looks ordinary. This message is for the part of you that has been sensing that something critical is near, even while life keeps moving with its familiar noise. Stay with me, because what you have been carrying is going to be named, and the meaning of these days will become clearer than it has felt so far. You may have been calling them ordinary days, but your body has not been agreeing with that name. Your chest has been tightening, your sleep has been lighter, and your mind has kept returning to the same quiet question: why does this feel different now? The answer is not panic, and it is not imagination, because when God begins to mark a moment, the inner life often notices before the outer life does. These days are not asking you to fear the future. They are asking you to stop ignoring the signs that have already been touching your routine. You are being prepared to see what has been hidden in plain sight. You are being asked to listen before the noise gets louder. What feels critical is not meant to crush you. It is meant to wake you gently and fully. You know how a room can look unchanged while your body refuses to settle inside it. And that is where this message begins. You sit on the edge of the bed or in the car before you go in, and the silence feels less empty than weighted, as if it is waiting for you to notice something. The phone is in your hand, but you do not open the message right away, because part of you already knows the conversation is more tired than the words on the screen. Your shoulders stay lifted for a moment too long, and then drop when you admit to yourself that something is off. That sensation is not random. It is the kind of inner signal that comes when a season is no longer behaving the way it used to, and your body has become the first witness. You may attention. You need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. Even say under your breath, "This does not feel the same anymore." And that sentence carries more truth than you have given it credit for. The house is still the house, the table is still the table, the road is still the road, but your inner posture has changed. You are not as able to perform peace as you once were. You are not able to laugh off what your spirit has already registered. There is a holy fatigue in that, and there is also mercy, because when the body starts refusing false ease, the soul is being invited toward honesty. What you keep feeling is not weakness. It may be discernment taking shape. And discernment always begins by making old normal feel less convincing. There is a reason these days are carrying weight, and it is not because you have failed some hidden test. The pattern is closer to a quiet summons than to a punishment. You have been living with a pressure that has made simple things feel loaded, and the load has been teaching you what can no longer be carried the same way. The message is not that everything is collapsing, but that something inside your life is being measured more carefully now. You may be sensing that because certain conversations feel thinner, certain distractions feel louder, and certain places demand more from you than they give back. That is part of the contract of this season. God does not always reveal the whole road at once, but he does often make the next step impossible to ignore. In that sense, these critical days are not meant to overwhelm you with mystery. They are meant to uncover the difference between what was merely familiar and what is still faithful. You will recognize the signs. You will recognize the tension between what used to soothe you and what now leaves you empty. You will recognize why the same old pace no longer fits your breathing, and you will begin to see that the discomfort may be a form of mercy, not denial. The old way of naming your life cannot hold what is being returned to you now. So the question is not whether something is happening. The question is whether you will let the signal become clearer than the noise. There is more to this than timing, and the deeper layer is already moving toward the surface. You can feel it in the ordinary hours of the day, in the way your thoughts circle back when the room gets quiet. Maybe it happens while you are washing a cup, standing at the sink, and remembering a conversation that did not sit right in your chest. Maybe it happens when you walk through a familiar hallway and suddenly feel that the old version of you is no longer allowed to live there. Maybe it happens in the shower, where no one can hear your prayer, and the silence feels less like emptiness and more like being watched over. Those moments matter. They are the kind of moments where the hidden life becomes visible to the one living it. You are noticing that some habits no longer comfort you, and that is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that your appetite is changing. The things that once kept you distracted are no longer feeding what is growing in you. Your eyes may be heavier, your breath may be slower, and your hands may pause before answering because your inner life is refusing the speed that used to govern it. That refusal is not rebellion, it is a boundary forming. And when a boundary forms, the old confusion begins to lose its authority. Why is this happening to me, you may think, and that question is not a sign of doubt, it is the beginning of discernment. What is happening may be the clearing away of what kept you busy enough to miss your own direction. The room looks the same, but your spirit is no longer willing to live by appearances alone. That is why these days are critical. They expose what was hidden in your routine before it could harden into your identity. You have also been feeling the strange distance that can appear between yourself and places that used to feel normal. A conversation that once seemed easy now feels like work. A room that once fit your posture now makes you shrink without knowing why. A message you would have answered quickly now sits untouched because your peace has become more important than your performance. That change can unsettle you because it makes you realize that the version of you who used to move automatically is not the version leading now. It is like standing in a doorway and sensing that one part of your life has ended before the next one has fully shown itself. That in-between place is not comfortable, but it is honest. You cannot keep pretending that every environment is still neutral when your body keeps reacting as though it knows better. The old habits no longer soothe you, and the old pace no longer flatters you. That is not a loss to be mourned. It is an adjustment to be honored. The spirit often speaks first through unease, because unease tells the truth when the mind wants to smooth everything over. There is a quiet line running through these days, and it says that not every open door is yours, and not every familiar voice is still aligned. The cost of ignoring that line is more fatigue, more inner noise, and more delay. The gift of hearing it is relief, even before clarity arrives. You are being invited to stop forcing yourself through places that have already stopped agreeing with your peace. That invitation may feel sharp, but it is still kindness. It keeps you from confusing familiarity with assignment. There are moments when your own silence starts to feel like a message, and you do not know whether to call it caution, wisdom, or exhaustion. You sit with your phone in your hand, and the unsent reply remains unsent because something in you refuses to speak too quickly. You wake before the alarm, with a sentence still echoing inside you, and it follows you into the morning like an unfinished prayer. You go through the motions of the day, but the inward pace has changed, and that is what makes these days critical. The change is not dramatic enough for everyone else to notice, yet it is strong enough to reshape your decisions. That is how discernment often works. It does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as an inward no that feels more truthful than your old yes. You are being asked to trust that quiet no when it keeps returning. You are being asked not to shame yourself for growing harder to hurry. The listener who learns to honor that pause is the one who avoids being carried back into what has already expired. The listener who calls every delay a problem often misses the protection hidden inside it. Your quiet is not emptiness, it is a threshold, and what stands on the other side of a threshold is often not punishment, but return. That is why this feels so serious. The soul knows when it is standing close to a turning point, even before the mind has the words. You have not been abandoned to confusion, even when confusion has been loud around you. The scriptures keep echoing this kind of hour, when someone senses a weight before understanding the assignment, when someone stands in the wilderness of uncertainty before the next instruction becomes visible. Moses hesitated before the burning bush. Elijah felt emptied before he heard the still, small voice. Joseph lived through delay before the meaning of his story became visible to others. Your life may not look exactly like theirs, but the pattern is recognizable. There is a season when the outside world does not validate what the inside world is already carrying. That is often where the chosen listener feels most uneasy. You notice what others dismiss. You sense what others overlook. You feel the pressure of timing in ways that are hard to explain. That is not because you are superior. It is because you have become harder to deceive. These critical days are exposing that sensitivity for what it is, not fragility, but a form of readiness. Still, readiness can be uncomfortable because it asks you to stop living as though everything is neutral when it is not. The door does not feel open because the door is teaching you discernment. The delay does not feel kind because it is teaching you patience that is not passive, and the silence does not mean absence. It may be the place where your hearing is being sharpened, so do not waste this by calling it nothing. What is pressing on you is not there to break you. It is there to make you pay attention before the next movement begins. If you keep pretending that nothing is happening, the cost will not be dramatic at first, but it will be real. You will become tired in places that should have stayed light. You will answer from habit instead of from peace. You will keep entering rooms where your spirit has already paused at the threshold. That is how the inner life gets dulled, not by one great betrayal, but by many small agreements with what no longer fits. The danger in these critical days is not only external pressure, it is also the temptation to normalize what should be named. You know the feeling of taking a deep breath and still not feeling settled. You know the feeling of being surrounded by familiar voices and still sensing that something in you has moved ahead. You know the quiet ache of saying yes when your whole body wanted to wait. Those are not small things, they are markers. They reveal where your life is being asked to come into alignment. You may even hear the old thought, I should just keep going. But that thought is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is fear wearing a productive face. The message in these days is not that you must solve everything at once. It is that you must stop lying to yourself about what your spirit already knows. Ignoring the signal does not cancel it, it only prolongs the strain. And strain has a way of becoming a language if you refuse to learn the first one. Better to hear the whisper now than to be forced to hear the alarm later. That is the mercy inside these critical dates. So pause here and let the signs settle inside you instead of over your head. If even one part of this has landed in you, if your body has recognized the truth before your mind could organize it, type 888 in the comments. That simple code is not magic. It is a sign of overflow, a quiet confirmation that you have been hearing correctly. Type 888 and then come back to me. The point is not the number itself, but the agreement it marks. Your hands writing it become part of your own witness, a small act that says you are paying attention to what is being revealed. Do not rush past that. Let it stand for a moment like a post in the ground. The next layer is not smaller. It is deeper. We are moving now from the signs you have felt into the pattern beneath them. What has seemed scattered is about to begin speaking as one whole story. And once that pattern is seen, it is harder for fear to disguise itself as wisdom. So come back and keep your attention here. The story is not ending. It is opening. What you have been feeling is not just pressure from outside. It is also a pattern inside that has been running quietly for a long time. The signs made you alert, but now the deeper question is what they have been trying to interrupt. There are seasons when a person learns to survive by shrinking before entering the room, and then that shrinking gets mistaken for humility. There are seasons when someone learns to over-explain because being misunderstood has hurt too often, and then that over-explaining gets mistaken for care. There are seasons when peace is confused with disappearance because silence once kept things safe. You may have lived some form of that pattern without ever naming it. It formed as adaptation, not as failure. It kept you steady when being fully seen did not feel safe. But what once protected you can become the thing that prevents your return. That is the tension in the middle of this message. You are not being shamed for how you learn to survive. You are being invited to outgrow the survival pattern that is no longer needed. The body remembers what the mind has normalized. The shoulders hold what the mouth never said. The chest tightens when a room asks for a version of you that costs too much to maintain. That is why the pattern matters. It is not random. It is a story your nervous system learned before your spirit had language for it. And now the spirit is speaking louder than the old script. You can see the root of it when a conversation leaves you drained, long before it should, or when a familiar duty begins to feel like a costume that no longer fits. The issue is not always the conversation itself. The issue is the old reflex it awakens in you. You start reading everyone else before you trust your own breath. You start measuring whether your piece will be approved. You start adjusting your tone before you even speak. That is the kind of hidden pressure these days are exposing. It is not a moral failure. It is a learned way of staying safe in rooms that rewarded performance and punished honesty. But now, the cost of that strategy is becoming too high. You feel it in the fatigue after being around people who used to feel normal. You feel it in the hesitation before opening a message. You feel it in the way your inner life pulls back when something asks you to become smaller than truth. Those are not signs to ignore. They are signs that your soul is refusing to keep paying a price that no longer buys peace. The root may be fear of obedience, or a need for control, or the habit of earning permission before moving. Whatever shape it has taken, it is being exposed now because God does not leave his people trapped inside survival forever. He returns them to clarity. He returns them to the voice that is quieter than fear and truer than performance. That return can feel like loss before it feels like freedom. Still, it is freedom beginning to speak. There is a difference between the mind trying to manage uncertainty and the spirit trying to obey what has already been shown. You have felt that difference in the way your thoughts race while your chest stays still, or in the way your body goes quiet when something finally lines up. The mind wants to keep explaining, the body wants relief, the spirit wants truth. When those three are not moving together, confusion becomes expensive. You may hear yourself say, "I cannot pretend everything is normal," and that sentence is not drama, it is honesty. The old role asks you to keep smiling, keep agreeing, keep reducing yourself to what makes other people comfortable. But your inner life is no longer cooperating with that arrangement. The body reacts before the words can dress it up. The throat tightens, the breath shortens. The shoulders carry the weight of a yes that was never fully alive. This is where discernment becomes practical. It shows you that not every uneasy feeling is anxiety, and not every pause is indecision. Some pauses are wisdom. Some discomfort is a boundary being born. Some tiredness is the soul refusing to perform another season of pretending. That is why these days are critical. They are separating old fear from new direction. They are allowing the body to become an ally rather than a mask. If you do not listen here, you will keep confusing pressure with purpose. If you do listen, you will begin to hear a different rhythm under the noise. That rhythm is not loud. It is steady. It is the sound of alignment returning. Some environments keep feeding the old pattern because they benefit from your shrinking more than they care about your growth. You already know what that feels like. It can be a conversation where you leave more tired than you arrived. It can be a room where your quietness is misunderstood as distance. It can be a group that rewards performance and barely notices peace. It can even be a well-meaning voice that keeps urging you to move faster than your spirit can follow. None of that needs to become paranoia. Discernment does not require suspicion. It requires honesty about what drains and what restores. You are allowed to notice that certain people only know how to meet the old you, not the one emerging now. You are allowed to notice that some settings ask you to become smaller in order to belong. That realization is painful because it changes the meaning of familiarity. But it also explains why your chest tightens in places you used to call normal. The old conversation still sounds like home to your memory, but your body knows the difference now. The part of you that is being returned cannot survive by pleasing every room. That is not a punishment. It is a protection. And protection often arrives disguised as discomfort until we learn its language. These critical days are teaching you that not every door that opens is sent for you, and not every atmosphere deserves your immediate trust. The more clearly you see that, the less power confusion has to keep you inside an expired role. Opposition often works by making the wrong thing feel urgent. It pulls at your schedule, fills your day with lesser demands, and convinces you that clarity can wait until later. You know that tactic because it shows up in ordinary life, not only in dramatic moments. A message arrives just as you were about to pray. A distraction appears the moment you begin to think clearly. A conversation drags you into proving yourself again. Fear calls itself wisdom and tells you to keep the pace, because stopping would mean facing what is actually true. That is how the old pattern stays alive. It does not always attack directly. It simply keeps you busy enough to forget your center. These critical days are stripping that away. They are exposing how often urgency has been used to keep you from obedience, and how often noise has been used to keep you from hearing. The body feels this as scattered energy, shallow breathing, restless hands, and a tiredness that rest alone does not fix. That tiredness is not random. It is what happens when the soul keeps being asked to run on a path it has already outgrown. You are being invited to stop letting lesser urgency determine your direction. You are being invited to make room for what is steady, what is truthful, what is quietly led. The old role says move quickly, so nobody questions the pace. The new path says wait long enough to recognize what is yours. That difference is everything, because once you can name the strategy, you stop mistaking disruption for destiny. The moment of truth comes when you realize that what you have been calling confusion has actually been a threshold. You are standing at the edge of a room you cannot enter by shrinking any longer. The old pattern has made a bargain with fear, and you are no longer willing to honor it. That is a serious turning point. It does not always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels like grief because you are letting go of a survival method that once kept you intact. But grief and freedom often arrive together. You do not need to become hard in order to become clear. You do not need to become loud in order to become stable. You do not need to prove that you are changing in order for change to be real. You only need to stop negotiating with what has already been revealed. That is the threshold line. Once you cross it inwardly, your next steps start making sense in a different way. You begin to notice that your breathing changes when truth is near. You begin to notice that peace is not always dramatic, but it is unmistakable. You begin to understand that obedience is often quieter than fear ever was. The listener who sees this does not need to force an outcome. The listener who sees this simply stops feeding the old loop. And that is where the deeper image begins, because the root now needs something visible enough to be remembered when the old reflex tries to return. What has been covered is about to be described so that you can recognize it when it starts to move. Picture a well in the middle of a quiet courtyard, not broken, not dry, only covered. That is what your life has felt like in more than one season. The water was there, but the surface was hidden. The place was still, but not empty. The people passing by could not tell whether anything lived below, and that is often how hidden calling feels from the outside. You may have thought you were delayed beyond usefulness, but the well was never dry. It was only covered for the right hour. The stone on top was not a sentence of abandonment. It was a form of preservation. In the heat of the day, the courtyard looked ordinary, almost neglected, yet beneath it there remained depth, freshness, and a quiet promise that had not been lost. This is where your story has been living, not in failure, but in concealment, not in emptiness, but in waiting. The well remembers the hands that once drew from it. It remembers the seasons when people came thirsty and left refreshed. It remembers the dust that settled over its opening and the patience that kept it from being abandoned. You may have wondered whether your own depth had gone silent. It has not. It has been covered from improper access, and that is why these days are critical. They are not simply asking you to feel more. They are asking you to remember that what is covered can still be full. The first sign of return is not noise. It is the recognition that depth was never the same thing as absence. The covered well is not a metaphor of loss alone. It is a record of timing. Some things in you had to stay hidden because premature access would have muddied what was being protected. You can see that in the way certain desires did not disappear, even though they were not available to be used yet. You can see it in the way your gifts kept returning under different names, as if the well kept calling to itself. The covering may have felt like delay, but delay is not always denial. Sometimes it is the mercy that keeps the water clean. When the right hand begins to remove the stone, the whole meaning changes. What looked still begins to speak. What looked forgotten begins to breathe. What looked unavailable proves it was waiting for a trustworthy hour. You may have experienced that same ache in relationships, work, prayer, or identity, where something in you knew there was more, but the timing had not yet opened. That ache was not wasted. It was depth recognizing its own covering. The body knows this too. It feels it as a strange pressure that is not panic, and as a quiet alertness when the old distractions fail to satisfy. You are being prepared to honor what was hidden without despising the season that hid it. That is mature discernment. It does not curse the cover. It thanks God for the preservation. And once you can do that, you no longer interpret your life only through what was visible. You start reading it through what was kept alive beneath the surface. The pressure you feel in these days is often the pressure of the cover beginning to move. It is subtle at first, like a stone shifting enough for light to touch the edges beneath it. You may feel that shift when a conversation lands differently, or when an old fear loses some of its voice, or when you realize you are no longer trying to force yourself to belong where you have already outgrown the shape of the room. That attention you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you. And strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.